Okay, let's sort of get started today. We'll start from the bottom rather than the top, and just remind you that on Thursday we have an exam, 6:30 to 8:30, and I'm hoping we can all fit in C1 next door. Okay, so if we can't, I'll have to split into two rooms, but that's where we'll end up. And if you have been studying at all, which I would advise you to do, you should look at the past few midterms, and if you find difficulty doing any of the questions in the midterms or at the end of chapters, we're just doing chapter 2, 3, 4, so particularly chapter 3 and 4, you should be able to work through most of the problems there. And if you're having any difficulty, then come along tonight, tomorrow night, or Wednesday night, 5 to about 6:30ish, in C534, which is in the Commerce Building on the 5th floor there. There's a seminar room. Okay, so I'll just be in there to answer general kind of questions at that time. It's completely voluntary. I mean, I don't think, well, let me put it this way. My strategy in setting the exam is to give you kind of a reasonable exam that's going to test your knowledge. If you read the textbook, you've been listening in class, can you do the basic things? And if you can, you're going to pass. If you want to get a good mark, then I'd study the past midterms. Otherwise, I want to kind of make it an interesting course with a reasonable kind of exam. Okay, so it's not going to be a killer of an exam. Be like the ones in the past few years. So those are the office hours, or not? It's really not really office hours. It's kind of like a tutorial when we can't afford tutors. Okay, so we got about 4.5 hours just in the evening to have a bit of a chat, and I'll make some time, maybe Thursday afternoon, but that's pushing it a bit late, okay? I teach in the morning, but I will be make a couple hours in the afternoon if you're kind of running at the last minute and can't figure some stuff out, okay? Now, there's a handout floating around. Is there anybody who doesn't have a handout up there? Okay. Are there any extra ones? Can you get it down to this guy down here? Thank you. Okay, at the end of the last class, we had worked through a concept of trying to figure out what to expect in a game, and the concept was a dominance idea, okay? And in these simultaneous games, remember, we're thinking of them as non-cooperative games, so that players are not really communicating with one another. They're trying to figure out their own strategies, but also figure out the strategies that the other players have. And the dominance idea sounded pretty good. Like if you have a strategy for you, which is the best no matter what the other player is going to do, then you think, well, that's a pretty reasonable thing to play. And if the other player has such a strategy as well, you think it's a pretty reasonable thing for them to play. And when both players have a dominant strategy, then you would use that concept to try to predict what it is they will do in a game. Okay. Now, The Prisoner's Dilemma is famous as a simple, stylized 2x2 game to get across a really important strategic idea that sometimes what seems like rational behavior on the part of everybody's action, every player in a strategic situation, it can lead them into situations where they're actually all worse off than they could be if they didn't do the thing which was the rational thing to do. Okay, and so then we looked at a game where there was only one player had a dominant strategy, the other player didn't. So what do you do about the player who doesn't? Well, the player who doesn't can figure out that the other player does, and maybe work their way through and figure out what to expect in the game, and all players can do that. Then we had this little payoff matrix here, which there wasn't a real good story behind, and you just want to look at the payoffs in it to try to think through what would I expect to happen if the payoffs were like this in a game where there's, one of the players has 3 options, the blue player, one of the players has 4 options, the red player, what do we expect to happen? Well, what we did is we said, are there any dominant strategies? And there wasn't. But there was a particular strategy that was dominated. That is, it seemed to be worst. There was always something better than that one to do. So you eliminate that one. Okay, and then once you eliminate that one, you can sort of think of a new game. It's actually the old game, but it is a new game where everybody's kind of not expecting people to do certain things. Okay, and so they've kind of reduced the game a little bit. A little more reasonable to think about. And then we looked at that game and said, are there any dominant strategies? So are there any dominated strategies? And we worked our way through and worked our way through. And finally, we ended up with one particular pair of strategies, row L and row M, with payoffs 5 and 4, which is what we expected would happen in this game. Okay. Now, I want to approach the problem of what to expect in the game in a different way now. Instead of using dominance ideas, we're going to use a concept called best response. Okay, and the idea of a best response is players are out there interacting with one another. They have to make beliefs out about what other people are going to do. And given your beliefs, you try to make a best response given what you believe other people are going to do. And your best response is, well, you look at your own preferences, you look at what you expect other people to do, and you try to figure out the best thing for you to do. Now, that isn't necessarily going to tell you what to do, because sometimes what's the best thing for you will depend upon what the other player does. So that's what we're going to have a look at now, okay? And at the end of this little discussion, or monologue, as it is, we're going to come up with a concept called Nash Equilibrium, which is a way of kind of synthesizing all of the ideas we've had about what to predict in a game. Okay? And then we'll define the concept of Nash Equilibrium nice and tightly, and then for the rest of the course we'll keep refining our ideas about it, because it's quite a deep and important concept. Okay? So, let's look at this payoff matrix, and suppose we start on the first row, and we say, assume that the red player plays the top strategy. Okay? Matter of fact, just to keep our attention focused on that top row, let's blot out the other ones. Okay? And what we're going to do is we look across the blue players, the blue numbers, and those blue numbers correspond to the choices of the blue player. So we're looking across the row, concentrating on the blue numbers, ignore the red numbers, okay? Just concentrate on the blue numbers, because those are the blue players' payoffs, and the blue player is the one who's going to be trying to figure out what's my best response to the red players playing T. So I put a little X here, because a 3 is the highest number in that row, okay? So you're looking for the best or the maximum in the row going across, and that maximum corresponds to the blue player playing the strategy M. Okay. What about the blue player's best response to the red player playing H? Well, we look at the blue numbers, 5, 0, 4. Biggest number is 5. Put a little X beside the 5, okay? What about if the red player plays row L? Look across the row, 2, 4, and 3. Put a little X beside the 4. Okay? And just kind of proceed mechanically through here, looking across the row. Remember, the row is identified by the red player's strategy, so it's the bottom one. We're looking across the row, 6, 5, and 7. Pick out the highest number. And notice what we've done is we've got a pattern of X's which tell us the best responses for the blue player. Okay, and the best response for the blue player depends upon what the red player does, and that's the X's are all over the place, right? Sometimes R is the best, sometimes M is the best, sometimes L is the best. Okay, and that's typically we don't have a dominant strategy here. If they're all lined up in a column, we would have a dominant strategy, but we don't have that. Okay, so the best response for the blue player to whatever the red player does will depend on what the red player does. Okay, and so we just kind of accept that. Now we're going to turn it around and look at it from the red player's standpoint. Let's look down a column. Again, to fix this in our heads here, blot out the other columns, and we're just looking down a column, trying to find the biggest red number in that column, not the biggest blue number. Okay, the biggest red number. Why? Because going down the column corresponds to the red player choosing T, choosing H, choosing L, choosing B. As long as we assume the blue player is playing left, then the red player controls the payoffs, T, H, L, B, 3, 4, 2, 5. So we put a little knot where the highest number is. Okay, let's do that for the remaining. If you look down the columns here, 2, 3, 5, 5's bigger, so put a knot. If you look down the column, 10, 6, 12, 9, 12 is the biggest. So it's just kind of a mechanical exercise where you're running through the various payoffs, and you try to figure out what the best responses are. Now, we've got the best responses of the blue player going across. We've got the best responses of the red player going down. And then notice there is one cell where there's a knot and a cross. It's a mutual best response. Okay? And that idea of a mutual best response is the notion of is the key idea behind a Nash equilibrium. It's kind of like, okay, we've done this little mechanical thing. We don't know what to expect because the blue player can do 3 things, the red player can do 4 things. There could be all sorts of possibilities. But if you were thinking about it at rational play, you'd figure, well, if each player is playing a rational response to what they believe, is there anything these pair of players could believe such that when they're each believing it and making a best response to it, the other guy is also believing it and making a best response to it? Okay, so it's a mutual best response. And that's what the pair of strategies L and M are. If the red player plays L, then the blue player's best response is M. Okay, because we put a little X in there. 4 is higher than 2 is higher than 3. And if the blue player plays M, then the red player's best response is L, where they get a payoff of 5. Okay? So now what I said, if the blue player plays L, then if the red player plays L, the blue player's best response is M. The blue player doesn't know that the red player is going to play L. But suppose that he did believe it, okay? Then his best response, according to his belief, would be to play M. Let's look at it from the red player's perspective. He doesn't know what the blue player is going to do, but supposing he believes that the blue player is going to play M, then his best response is to play L. And notice that we use the language of beliefs now, that the strategies are M and L are what they are. The players could play them or not, but we're thinking about whether each of the players believes the other guys are going to play them. And notice what happens here is that when the red player believes the blue player is going to play M, his belief is confirmed in this Nash equilibrium, okay? Because the blue player finds it in his best interest to play M, given that he believes the red player is playing L, which is what the red player is playing, in this Nash equilibrium, or in this particular pair of strategies. You know, you can sort of think, well, why don't we go for something else? Why don't we try this one down here? Isn't this like the prisoner's dilemma? Here these guys are playing L and M. The red player gets 5, blue player gets 4. They could both be better off over here, right? 9 for the red player, 7 for the blue player. So why isn't this what we predict would happen? It's got the most payoffs for both of them. It's better for both of them here. Why don't we predict this? Okay, and so you go through the reasoning and think, well, supposing everybody does believe this. Okay, supposing the blue player believes that the red player is going to play B, and supposing the red player believes that the blue player is going to play R. Okay, that's a possible belief. Let's just assume it and see what happens. Okay, so to figure it through. Well, supposing then that we look at it from the red player's perspective, he's believing that the blue player is going to play R. And if he believes the blue player is going to play R, should he continue to play B? Well, 12 is better than 9. No. If the blue player is going to play R, then the red player should play L, because that's giving me a payoff of 12 rather than 9. Okay, so though it's possible that they each could play R and B, red B, blue R, it's possible they could each play that. It's possible they each could believe that. If they do believe that, then the red player is doing something irrational. He's not making a best response, okay? And that's the idea. Well, why wouldn't we expect it? Well, we expect kind of when people are strategically interacting, given their beliefs, that, you know, they try to do the thing that's best for them, given what they believe. If they both believe this thing, R and B, then the red player wouldn't continue to play B. He wouldn't be making a best response. Okay. Now, when you're sort of thinking about people's beliefs, sometimes you sort of think, well, gee, don't you need some statistics and things like that? Like maybe we should look at lots of plays of this game and see how many times the red player plays it, blue player. Well, you could use some statistics, but you can also try and think it through and say, well, would I expect as a blue player the red player to play the red B? Well, I could, but if I did, he'd be doing something that would be kind of irrational. Okay, so I wouldn't want to expect that. And the red player is sitting here trying to figure out what's the blue player going to be thinking about. Well, the blue player is going to be thinking about what I'm going to be doing, okay, and is he going to really expect me to play B? Well, not really, okay, it's not really a rational belief. Okay, now, we talked about rational strategies, but now we're talking about rational beliefs. We're trying to say, is it reasonable to believe that the blue player will play R and the red player will play B? And the answer is, well, no, it doesn't pass this basic test we're going to set up for people's beliefs, which, given the beliefs, okay, which are about strategies, are the strategies which people are supposed to be doing, the ones that are the best responses to what would be their beliefs, given we started out with some strategies, okay, in the first place. And the answer is no. So this in this case, the strategy pair B and R doesn't pass that test. Would one of the players want to change their mind in that strategy? Think of it that way. Well, yes, the red player would rather play L. Okay, so figuring that out, the blue player wouldn't expect him to play B. He would expect him to play L if he plays R. And if he plays L, then the blue player doesn't want to play R because then he's only going to get 3 rather than 4, which you could get if you got M. Okay, so again, what will happen is if you pick some other cell that's not a Nash equilibrium, let me say it again, there's only one Nash equilibrium in this whole set of payoff matrices because there's only one pair of strategies that are mutual best responses. Okay, with some other pair of payoffs, it's not a Nash equilibrium. Any other pair of payoffs that doesn't have that property of being a Nash equilibrium, somebody will be behaving a little bit irrationally. Again, we got to find out what that irrationality is. Well, in this one, it's that the red player isn't playing his best response to the blue player's R. Okay. So that's another way you can sort of try to rationalize the Nash equilibrium as a prediction. Remember, there's lots of pairs of strategies in this table that could happen, and they're all possible, but the theory says, there's only one, the one L and M, that has the property that each player is playing a mutual best response to the other player in that equilibrium. Okay. Now you get the idea of equilibrium. What's an equilibrium? Well, just think of it, well, you can think of it as an engineering concept, it's like a state of balance, or you can think of it as a strategic concept, is that it's a set of beliefs, which is kind of like a state of balance, in that each player will be expecting the player to do other things, and given what their expectations are, the thing that they're doing is the best response, and the other players will all be thinking what they're doing is the best response, and nobody will want to change. Nobody will want to deviate from that equilibrium. Whereas any other non-Nash equilibrium point, if we ask the question, well, why not that one? Why wouldn't we predict that to happen? Because the red player is doing something against his own interests if he does believe in that equilibrium. Okay? So that's the idea of a Nash equilibrium. Now, I wrote down a little definition here for you because this definition applies to any game. Okay? It applies to sequential games. It applies to simultaneous games. Wherever we can use the concept of a strategy, we would use the idea of a Nash equilibrium. Now, it's true we didn't use the idea of a Nash equilibrium when we looked at sequential games. We will go back and look at that, not for the exam, but when we try to tie together the sequential and simultaneous games. But this is the general idea. Okay? Basically, there's a bunch of players. What can they do? Well, they got strategies. And what's the information they've got? Well, it's kind of embedded in the strategies or the structure of the game, but they got strategies. And so we're trying to figure out what strategies would a theory predict. Okay? And this particular theory, developed by John Nash, said, look at, what we want is some strategies, a list of strategies, one for each player. So I put a little asterisk beside it, like it's specific strategies. And every one of those strategies, when you looked at from the perspective of that individual player, is a best response to all of the other strategies that are in that list. Okay? And the idea is the list defines what people believe. And given what people believe, then they make the best response to what their beliefs are. Okay? Let me just go over that again. This is a really abstract definition, right? It says strategic situations, there are players, they can do things, they have information, they have payoffs. And there's a strategy concept. Strategy is a complete specification of all the things they can do and all the circumstances they find themselves in the game. I mean, I can rattle that off because I've rattled it off for a number of years, but you should memorize it, okay? Because it's a deep concept. Games can get quite complex. You could be in lots of situations. There could be lots of uncertainty, all kinds of things going on, but strategy is a complete specification of all the things you do and all the situations you find yourself in. So what we want to do is we want to come up with a list of strategies, which is a list. But what's the list? The list is going to be what we expect people to believe in if they're rational intelligent agents. Okay. Now, you'll see, as we do the experiments, as we this sort of stuff, that it's kind of difficult to be a rational intelligent agent. There's a little bit of effort involved in doing that. But sometimes the effort's worth it in terms of the payoffs. Okay. But our assumption is that people are going to make that effort. They're intelligent enough to figure these things out. So we have the list. And in this particular simple game, we came up with a pair of strategies, L and M. There's only two players, a red player and a blue player, and these are the Nash Equilibrium strategies. And we didn't put any stars beside them because we're pulling these out and saying these are mutual best responses. L is a best response to M. M is a best response to L. We just worked that out in this table here. The payoffs, now the payoff numbers are not the Nash Equilibrium. What's the Nash Equilibrium is the strategies. And out of the strategies there emerged some payoffs for people, okay? So you want to try and get that clear. I'll put this definition up on the web with this particular template. You know, I started off with just a little matrix so you can kind of work it out on your own. But this is a key idea. This Nash Equilibrium drives everything that we're going to look at through our in the course. And the basic idea is it captures the idea of intelligent rational play. Sometimes it's a little bit it's an interesting concept, okay? And we're going to look at some of the interesting aspects of this concept in these what are called coordination games. Any questions on that? Just the idea so far? Okay. Good question. Yes. And that's what we're going to see. The next little sets of games we have, like the question was, can you have more than one Nash Equilibrium? Well, you can have more than one, and you can actually have none. Okay. And then to get around the idea of none, it's sort of like square roots. You know, you're sort of supposed to not have imaginary numbers, so mathematicians invent something to solve the equation. Well, they do the same thing with, what if you don't have a Nash Equilibrium? Well, we're going to introduce an idea called mixed strategies, which was invented to solve the problem when there are no Nash equilibria. It gets a little bit technical, but it's also kind of fun. Okay, but so in the moment, let's look at these. Let's look at some simple games where there are several Nash equilibria, and these are called coordination games. We actually had one in the very first class. Don't write this down, okay, because you've seen it before, and it'll be up in the web. Remember, in the first week, I played a number of little games, and we had a color matching game, and we had this. The payoffs were if blue, if the color blue was chosen by the red player and the color gold was chosen by the blue player, then they each got 2 chocolate bars. But if they didn't get that particular match, then they got nothing, okay? If they got a black and a red or a green and a yellow, then they got 2 chocolate bars each. But if they didn't get these other matches, they got nothing. So this is our payoff matrix. And I put in the best responses, which you should be able, go through and work it out so you can get all the. There's 3 cells that have mutual best responses, okay? So in this case, there's 3 Nash equilibria. Now you sort of think, well, that was a difficult game to play, okay? And part of the problem was that there are 3 reasonable things to expect according to the theory of what's reasonable, the Nash equilibrium theory. Let's go to a little bit simpler game where we only have 2 by 2, okay? And then we can kind of focus our attention. And the first simple game is called a pure coordination game. So what I've done is I've got a imagine a red player and a blue player, and they're trying to arrange to meet for coffee, but they can't communicate with one another, right? So it's not like a sequential game. They're not where one player can hey, go to Coffee Culture and say on their cell phone, hey, I'm over here, come on, let's have coffee together. It's like you got to choose where you're going to go for coffee as a red player without knowing where the blue player is going to go. And the blue player's got to choose where they're going to go for coffee without the red player going to go. So you're trying to get together, and the way you can figure that out is by looking at the payoffs. Now, remember I said as a religious rule in the course, always ask what the payoff numbers are. Well, typically when we see zeros, that's like the status quo, okay? And the status quo here is a situation where you're not together having coffee, but if you could both get together at the same coffee place, okay, the blue player goes to Cafe 101, the red player goes to Cafe 101, then they'll each get a payoff of 1. And the idea here of 1 is better than 0, okay? It's better to be, for the red player, to be at Cafe 101 than over at Coffee Culture if the blue player is at Cafe 101. And vice versa, if the blue player is at Coffee Culture, then it's better to be at Coffee Culture than it is to be at Cafe 101 for the red player. Similarly, if you go across the blue cells for the blue player, given the red players at Cafe 101, it's better for the blue player to match up and be at Cafe 101 rather than Coffee Culture. Ditto down here. If the red player's at Coffee Culture, from the blue player's standpoint, 1 is better than 0. It's better to be at Coffee Culture when the red player's at coffee culture. Now, the idea here is this is a fairly simple payoff matrix, right? There's only ones and zeros. And notice that there are two Nash equilibria. Okay, if the blue player expects the red player to be at coffee culture and the red player expects the blue player to be at coffee culture, then each of them would have a mutual best response by being at coffee culture. If they believe that, they would each go to coffee culture. If they believe the other one at Cafe 101, they would go to Cafe 101. The strategic tension here is which equilibria are they going to believe? Okay, you know, if I'm the red player and I'm thinking, oh, the blue player, you know, got a focal point thing here, he must be going to coffee culture because we went to Cafe 101 last week, and so I'm going to go to coffee culture, but then he goes to Cafe 101, you miss out. Okay, so that's the idea of this pure coordination game. Is both players, if you like, have the same interests. There's no conflict of interest, direct conflict of interest, in that if you look here, they both want to avoid meeting up at the wrong place. They would both like to be at the same place, but the problem is they've got to coordinate on what that same place is, and they can't communicate. Okay? So that's one type of coordination game where there's multiple equilibrium. Here's the second type of coordination game with multiple equilibria, and the only thing I've done is I've changed the payoffs to go into coffee culture. And this is, you can think of it this way, as what are the preferences for each of the players? Well, take the red player. Their best option, remember, sometimes when you're looking at payoff matrix, it's a good idea to isolate the best and the worst. For the red player, it's best to be at coffee culture when the blue player's at coffee culture and he's at coffee culture, okay? So that's a 2. Cafe 101, okay, but not as good, okay? And then the worst situation here and here is where they've each gone to separate coffee places, so they're not meeting up. Similarly with the blue player, same pattern of preferences. So you can think of, again, there's not much conflict of interest here, right? There's the blue player and the red player's preferences really are the same, okay? They both like coffee culture better than they like Cafe 101, but they both like being at Cafe 101 rather than being at opposite places themselves, okay? Again, there's a little exercise you want to walk through when you're looking at these little payoff matrices, is to try and interpret them. How do you interpret them? Well, the numbers tell us something about the people's preferences. So you're trying to figure out, is there any conflict of interest? Is there any commonality of interest? Well, in the assurance game, just like the pure coordination game, the preferences are actually the same. Okay, each of them likes coffee culture. They take together at coffee culture. Best. Each of them likes Cafe 101 together, and if they're at different places, they think that's the worst. So their preferences are the same. Now, this is called an assurance game because, again, there's 2 Nash equilibria. You sort of figure out, which one do you think we'd expect to play? Well, you know the other player is in exactly the same boat as you, okay? So you'd be thinking, I know that they know, and they know that I know that we're facing this kind of dilemma. I just need some kind of assurance they're going to do the right thing, which is go to coffee culture, okay? And the right thing might be, well, I know that they're going to be thinking about getting the maximum payoffs for themselves and the maximum payoffs for me. They know that I'm going to be thinking that. The focal point, if you like, in this will be those nice, juicy payoffs at the end, okay? And that might be enough to create assurance. But if you're, you know, they might... Still might be. It would be reasonable to believe in Cafe 101 if you believe the other player was going to go to Cafe 101 and vice versa. Okay, so you got this little strategic problem. How are you going to coordinate? Well, the coordination might come. You just focus on those nice payoffs out there. They're going to focus on those nice payoffs. They're going to expect me to do that. I can expect them to do that. And we use that focal point to create an assurance that we're going to coordinate on this Nash equilibrium. Let's look at a third type of game. It's called Battle of the Sexes. And the idea is the red player can be we'll let the red player be the lady, and let's do it the other way around, okay? We'll let the red player be the guy, and the blue player can be the lady. And if you look at the pattern of preferences they have, identified for the red player's got a preference for coffee culture over Cafe 101, as long as the 2 of them are meeting up together, but doesn't like the situation where they're at opposite restaurants, okay? Similarly, the blue player likes Cafe 101 together when they're together with the red player, as compared to being at Coffee Culture when they're together with the red player, and doesn't like it when they're at opposite situations. Okay, now here there's some conflict of interest. So in the pure coordination game, there's no conflict of interest, and both equilibria are about the same. And the real problem is just trying to avoid either equilibrium would be fine. In the assurance game, both of them have a preference for one equilibria over another, and that might be enough. I will see later on, maybe not, depending how complex the game is. It might be enough to create some assurance for each of them, and they would each do the believe the other player would be hitting for the mutually best equilibria. But in the battle of the sexes, there's conflict of interest. They both want to be together, okay, to meet together. There's some commonality of interest. I mean, they'd rather be here or here than in these off-diagonal elements. They'd rather be at the restaurant drinking coffee together rather than going to the wrong places. Okay, but the red player would prefer Coffee Culture over Cafe 1. The blue player prefers Cafe 101 over Coffee Culture. Okay, we're not going to try and resolve this one now, this idea of the conflict of interest. We just want to identify it. Okay, the conflict of interest comes because there's two reasonable things to expect, and each of the players would prefer, they'd like, in some sense, they'd like to change the game so they could get their preferred outcome. Okay, so you think of it that way, is that though we might not be able to resolve this game by itself with Nash Equilibria, because there's two things to expect, each of the players might have interest in changing the game somehow. You know, telephone call. Hey, I'm going to Coffee Culture. Well, if you're the blue player, it'd be really quite cool if you could announce you're going to go to Coffee Culture. Oh, if you're a red player, you want to announce you're going to go to Coffee Culture, because then the other guy, if they believe that, will go to Coffee Culture too, and you'll get your better payoff. Okay, so just a little bit of communication, you could tweak the equilibrium in your favor. Okay, of course, the other guy might be thinking the same thing and phoning up you at the same time, or trying to make create some signal or some behavior that will induce you it'll change the game. Now, there's a third game, which is kind of a notorious sort of game. Let me get rid of this. The game of chicken has sort of let's look at the payoffs, okay? If we identify the best payoffs for the red player, that's a 1. And the worst payoffs are this -2. Now remember, what do the numbers mean? Well, 0 is the status quo, 1 is more preferred, -1 is not so good, and -2 is pretty bad. Okay. Now the idea behind this, I think I'll get across with a little video clip that I is the simultaneous game of chicken itself. I don't know what the second one is. I mean, you know, that's a sequential game where you watch some guy on a hang glider and you jump off a cliff. I don't think so. You know? Not my payoffs, anyhow. Okay, so if you like, you can think of the coordination game between the chicken game is that it's much like the battle of the sexes in that there are two equilibria here. You should work that out, that these are the two equilibria. Okay, and the two Nash equilibria, and there's a conflict of interest here. But one of the interesting things about the chicken game are these really bad negative payoffs about it. Okay, so that kind of distinguishes it from the battle of the sexes game, is that you've got these quite negative payoffs for both players. They don't have to be the same. Here, all these games are symmetric games, but the key idea behind the chicken game is that there are two Nash equilibria, and there's some conflict of interest about the Nash equilibria, but there's one, if they don't get it right, they can both get very, very wrong in terms of bad payoffs. Now let's have a quick look at one other game, a stylized 2x2 game, where there are no Nash equilibria. If we look at this payoff matrix, it's it's designed to kind of illustrate a situation which was really bad for the All Blacks 2 years ago when they had these terrible lineout situations. And the idea was that in a lineout situation, you can do all kinds of complex things in lineouts, but you got to decide whether you're going to throw short or throw long, and the defense has got to decide whether they're going to defend short or defend long. Okay, so if you think of the red team throwing short and the blue team defending short, then it's a 50-50 chance that you'll win. Okay, if you're and we'll take the payoffs here as kind of the chances of success. On the other hand, if you're the red player and you throw long when the other guys are defending short, then there's a 90% chance that you'll win. We couldn't quite make it 100 because we have some bad guys who can't catch. Okay. Now, on the other hand, if the blue player defends long and you throw short, then as a red player you've got an 80% chance of winning. Okay. But if they defend long and you throw long, then you only got a 40% chance of winning. You're not as good long as you are short, okay, in terms of success percentages. Okay, got that idea? So those are the payoffs. Now with these kind of payoffs, if you try to find the best responses, well, look what happens. If the blue player defends short, then the red player should defend long. But if the red player defends long, then the blue player should defend long and not short, because 60 is better than 10. Okay. On the other hand, if the blue player is defending long, the red player should be going short. But if the red player is going short, then the blue player should be defending short. And you just keep going round and round and round in circles. Now, the idea of round and round in circles is a good idea. Okay, you're sort of thinking, what would I expect people to do? Well, here, there's nothing reasonable to expect in the sense that there's no pair of strategies such that each player is making a mutual best response. There are best responses, but it depends on what the other guy does, and the depends, it just leads you in circular reasoning, going round and round and round. Okay? So that's a situation where there are no Nash equilibria. And we're going to see that there's a solution to this little problem, is that when there are games where there are no Nash equilibria, and this is called no Nash equilibria in pure strategies, there's another concept called a mixed strategy where, well, you don't go short all the time, but just some of the time, okay? And you don't go long all the time, you don't defend long all the time, but just some of the time. And so what you have to do there is you know that if you always go short, the other guy is going to be defending short. And if they defend short all the time, the other guys are always going to be going long. And so you can't be doing the same thing all the time. So we're going to, if you like, introduce a wider space of action, which is, well, you don't just have to go short or long. You could kind of go in between by sort of making it uncertain, creating some randomization in it, okay? And that's going to be probably about just what we do when we come back from the break. Okay? Now, let me just go back to... Got a little bit of time here. I want to introduce a practical kind of coordination game, which I think is kind of interesting. And that has to do with, we're going to do this for money and for chocolate bars. I've written up a payoff matrix for you, which describes the way in which people might work together. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've ever worked in a job with somebody else, you have to rely on the other person to carry their own weight in the job. So I had a situation, about 20 it was quite a while ago, okay? And I was a young guy, I had a friend, and we agreed to roof the house of a woman. I was in a church, and we had kind of a community support sort of thing. She was an elderly lady, and she needed her house roofed, so we said, okay, we'll do it. And she got all the stuff, and we spent the weekend doing it. Well, we spent 2 days doing it, but we had another 2 days of work. And the first couple of days, this guy and I just worked. It just flowed. It was fantastic. I don't know exactly why, but we didn't really have to talk with one another very much. We just seemed to work kind of effortlessly together. And the next 2 days, there was another guy who volunteered to come along and help us out. And it was just a mess. It was a nightmare. It was just like, you didn't know whether you were going to put the tiles down or where you were going to be, and you had to be talking. And eventually we all kind of just gave up and just, we ended up completing the job, but it took us a long time because we never really got our efforts together coordinated. And basically, when you don't get your efforts together coordinated, you go at the pace of the slowest person. And that's what this payoff matrix is designed to get a handle on. You could think of it as two divisions in a company. One division is making one kind of good, and the other division is making another kind of component, and the two things have got to fit together. But if one of them goes slower than the other, the output isn't going to be as fast as the one team does, because the other component guy is holding everything back. Okay, so it's like the weakest link. So this is called the minimum effort game, and it goes something like this. That I tried to put a little formula down so to help you reason through how to think about the effort payoffs. But you just think of it intuitively as that each of the red player and the blue player has an effort level, and I'm going to actually get you to play for some money here in a second, but let's run through the payoff matrix, okay? I think we've got about enough time to play at least one round. So the red player can choose 4 effort levels, okay? 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And the more effort you put in, the more it costs, okay? And so it's going to be costly to put in effort. And let's say, sitting at the front, okay, you're going to get stuck. So what was your name again? Lindsay. Okay, so Lindsay's sitting here, and supposing she's got 40 cents, okay? And what's your name? William? Okay, William's here. He's got 40 cents. And just imagine that every unit, if you don't put any effort into this, don't worry about what you're going to get, but it's not going to cost you anything, okay? But if you put in 1 unit of effort, it's going to cost you 10 cents. If you put in 2 units of effort, it's going to cost you 10 cents. 3, 4, okay? So every unit of effort costs you. On the other hand, there's some benefits that come out, and the benefits are when you're playing this game together. I'm going to give you 2 cents for sure. Okay, so you're going to get 2 cents for sure, and then what I'm going to do is look at your minimum effort choice and multiply it times 2, and give you that back as well. Okay, so remember, there's 3 things that are coming into your payoff. There's 20 cents up here, 2 tens for sure. You got to subtract off, like if Lindsay puts in 4 units of effort, and there's only 2 up there, and I'm sorry, it was Lindsay and William puts in no units of effort, okay, then the minimum effort is 0, so you're not going to get anything out at all except the 2, and you'll be minus 2, which means you have to give me 2 back, okay? And so that would be that's the kind of payoff thing. It's like in some sense, you got to work together. And let's look at the cells in this payoff matrix. Now, the best way to think about a big payoff matrix when you see all these numbers is to think, well, what's the best and what's the worst? Okay, well, let's go up here to the top and notice the payoffs that come with high effort. Okay, if William as a red player puts in 4 and Lindsay as a blue player puts in 4, then their payoffs are going to be 6 and 6. Now let's figure out how they got this, okay? What we're saying is, if their effort is 4, it's going to cost them 4 10-cent pieces each, okay? What are they going to get back? They're going to get back 2 plus 2 times the minimum effort. The minimum effort is 4, so that's 8. Okay, so they've got 8 plus 2 is 10, minus 4 is 6. Got that idea? Let's try this cell down here where there's 5 and 5. Each of them is putting in 3 units of effort, the same unit of effort. They're kind of coordinated on 3 and 3. Okay, it's not the full effort 4 and 4. It's just 3 and 3. So it's going to cost Lindsay 30 cents. It's going to cost William 30 cents just to put in that effort. But what are they going to get back? They're going to get back the 2 plus 2 times the minimum effort. The minimum effort is 3. It's the same for both of them. So that's 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. Minus their 3, which is 5. Let's go down. Let's just keep marching down the diagonal. Supposing each only put 2 units of effort in. That's a 2 units of effort each is a personal cost of 2. What are you going to get back for that 2? Well, the minimum effort is 2, so you're going to get 2 times 2 is 4. Plus the $2 that's in there, that's 6. So 6 minus 2 is 4. That's where you get the 4 and 4. Okay. So moving down the diagonal element diagonals, you can sort of see what the payoffs are. If you find trouble reading that, and tomorrow when we look at this, well, let's keep going. I want to play it once, but ask a question. Ask about that because I want you to be able to do this in an exam. At least read the payoff matrix. Okay. Now let's take this situation here where Lindsay contributes nothing, and William contributes nothing. So they just, in that case, if they choose 2, they've got their endowment. They don't lose anything. Doesn't cost them anything, and I'll give them 2 each. Okay. Got that idea? You're not going to split the 2. I'm going to actually give you 2 each. Okay, so why don't you guys just do that for... Okay, let's try it once more with another pair of players. Okay, let's just imagine that I just want to get this idea across. They're going to walk away with 60 cents by putting in no money. Okay, but you could walk away with your endowment of 4 plus 6 more, $1 each. Okay, this is the extra you're going to get. I mean, you've got that endowment of 4, and that's just in case you tend to work for. You got to give me that money back. Okay, but if you can coordinate to get up here at 4, and put your effort levels at 4, you're going to get 6 each plus the 40 that you started off with, your endowment. Okay, so your net is going to be 6. So let's let me try this. So I'll start off with an endowment, and I'm going to give out 4 pairs of here, okay? What's your name? Isabel, okay. Isabel. Can't do Megan, she's sitting in the front, okay? There you go. You got an idea how to play this, you think? A little bit, okay. Well, just do it once and see how we're doing. So we got... There you go. Better get a guide here. Okay, now the person sitting next to the people who have the 4... Okay, all the 4 cents is, or the 4 10-cent pieces, is just... that's yours to keep, okay? If we don't do anything, you walk away, you can have it. But if you put in, for every 1 unit of effort you put in, you got to be prepared to give up that 10 cents, okay? Now, let's. I'm just going to give you a card. You don't know who you're going to be matched up with. You don't know who you're going to be matched up with, and I'm going to just draw some cards at random to pair you guys up, okay? And what I want you to do is figure out how much effort you're going to contribute. And if you're sitting next to them, try, have a look and sort of figure how much effort am I going to put in? Now remember, if you're thinking about your own effort level, you have no idea who you're going to be paired up with and what they're going to do. Okay? But then you might try and think, can I use my game theory to figure out what to expect to happen? But before we use the theory, let's play this through. Do you want to just take out 2 cards? I'm going to take those 2. So what do you got? A king and a queen. Who's got the king? Who's got the king of whatever it is? I don't know what suit it is. Pam, have you got the king there? Have you guys got the king? Okay, we got a king, and who's got the queen? Okay, so you 2 are playing together. Did you make up a choice? Or are you making it up right now? Did you make a choice? Okay, just hang on a second. Did you make a choice? Not yet. Okay, take a punt. No, okay, so you're going to put 1, okay. So what was your choice? You put all 4, and you put in 1 unit of effort, okay? And you were kind of struggling. You had to guess and just put in something, right? What were you thinking about with 4? Okay, so what was your name? Adair was saying that she chose 4 because with the hope that she would gain the most. Now, if you look at, let's say that you're the red player and you choose 4, if you go across that top column, you're going to get 6, you're going to get 4, you're going to get 2, you're going to get 0, or you're going to get -4. Okay? And he put in 1, so the payoffs will be 0 for the red player and 3 for the blue player. So I give the 3 to the blue player. Oops. Now we have a 10 and a jack over there. What did the 10 and the, without changing your mind, guys, what did the 10 and the jack play? You put all of it in? What? And you gave nothing. Okay. So if you're the blue player and you're the red player, then the blue player put in all, which is 4. So we go down the left-hand column, and the blue player is going to get 6, 5, 2, 0, -4. I'm sorry, you have to pay me for your effort. So you put in all this effort. You put all the effort in, and the other player didn't put any effort in. Okay, so there's no kind of collective output, but she gets 2 because of the 2 that was in the beginning. Okay. Now, what I want you to do is, take this kind of stylized game, and tomorrow we'll come back and figure out the Nash Equilibria and just get you to talk a little bit about how you might think to play this game. Okay.